and welcome to Hey Boomer, the show for those of us who believe that we are never too old to set a new goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And with Hey Boomer, I am on a mission to support and inspire older adults as we look for new beginnings, confront endings and transitions, and evolve into who we want to be. And how do I do that? I do that by bringing amazing guests onto the Hey Boomer show. And I do that by offering coaching, transition coaching to people who are looking for new beginnings and confronting endings and just want a little help along the way. So my amazing guest for this week is Elly Katz. She is the founder and executive director of Sages and Seekers. This is a nonprofit with a mission to develop empathy while combating social isolation and ageism. The Sages and Seekers 8-week intergenerational program has changed the lives of thousands of older adults and the younger adult people that they are working with. I believe, and I venture to say that Elly probably believes the same thing, that there are more similarities between the generations than we recognize. The problem is that we rarely speak to people from different generations. And through Sages and Seekers, they build conversations and opportunities for the older adults and the younger adults to come together in conversation. Before I introduce her to you, I just want to tell you about two things. One is about my good friend, Christine Baumgartner. And this is for any of my single listeners who may be frustrated with online dating, meeting the wrong people, or just frustrated with dating in general. So Christine is a dating coach and a fellow podcaster for a show called Let's Talk Dating. She has helped me come to terms with my dating life and, how I'm looking for somebody. Do I want to find somebody? All of those questions. And I would recommend her to any of you that are struggling in those areas. You can check her out. Her website is theperfectcatch.com. Don't you love that? The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the coaching that I do. So let me encourage you to check out the coaching on the heyboomer.biz/coaching page. It's a 6-week program. And also the vitality assessment that you can get from the heyboomer.biz homepage. So let me encourage you to do those two things. In fact, you can check them out now while you are listening to us. And oh my goodness, we have so many wonderful visitors so far. All right, I am going to bring on my new exciting guest. I'm very excited to introduce you to Elly Katz. I'm just so excited to have you on because I've been looking into Sages and Seekers. I know some people that are part of it, and I can't wait to share your story with everybody. So I'd like to start with what inspired you. It's like 13 years since you've started this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what inspired you? How did you get started in this?
Well, it's actually a very interesting story. I was driving my 16-year-old to school, listening to NPR, and I heard this gentleman speaking about the state of the planet, and he used the word apocalypse. And I thought, wait, I have a 16-year-old. We can't be at an apocalypse now with the world. And then, I was white-knuckling the steering wheel, what can I do? And he had what I guess you would call a call to action. He said that he felt if everyone on the planet chose something that they were passionate about and did something in that arena, that we could turn the world around. And so I remember thinking, I was a graphic designer at the time, and that's what I studied in school and had done all my life. And so I thought, well, I hope other people are listening because I don't really have the time for this. And then as I dropped my son off and I drove home, I started to think, well, he said, what are you passionate about? And I loved, ever since I was young, I loved talking to older adults. I felt they were underutilized and disrespected, and it just always was upsetting to me because I thought they were fantastic human beings. So I'm driving and I get home and I thought to myself, yeah, I could do something with older adults. And so I went into my office, I sat down, I thought about what do older adults want? And I thought, well, they don't want to be 16 again because I don't want to be 16 again.
Right.
But that energy, that youthful vitality that young people bring into a room is just so life-affirming and engaging. And so I thought, maybe I could do something with older adults and teens. And I knew nothing about education. I'm not a gerontologist, didn't know much about older adults. And so I just decided I'm going to go to some schools, see if I can get, some kids interested in meeting older adults. And I'm going to go to some senior centers and see what they say. And I finally found some in the same town that would match and that said, yes, let's do it. And I'm not kidding you, Wendy. It was amazing. The very first meeting, I said to myself, I don't care if the kids don't like it. They're going to sit there and do a mitzvah because, they need to show respect and appreciate this other generation.
Mitzvah, would you describe that for us people who don't know?
Okay. A mitzvah is a good deed.
A good deed.
I think it's Yiddish.
It is.
Yeah. And so I just thought, they should do something wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But what was fascinating to me is that they were enjoying themselves. These 17 and 16-year-olds were laughing and asking questions. And my husband was doing documentary filming at the time. And I called him and I said, you have to bring your camera down to the senior center because this is weird. These kids really like it. And so from that moment on, I was hooked to continue to bring generations together. And now, of course, we're in our 13th year, and
wow,
it is fascinating and wonderful every single time.
Wow. So this man on NPR telling this story inspired you. And, how many of us hear things like that and we go, yeah, that would be good. But you did it. What kind of fears did you face when you said, well, I'm going to do this?
That's a great question. Wendy, I'm a pretty fearful person. I have a lot of, moments of anxiety and fear. But I think I really felt like it was something that needed to happen. And so I had more determination than I did fear. It became sort of like when you go fishing and you throw out the line and you want to see what you get back. I just called as many people as I could. And what was fascinating to me, I was very lucky because when I started Sages and Seekers, I lived in Boston and the schools there are very competitive and they're very good. And I couldn't get into public schools at the start. So I went to the best private school and I was very lucky. They signed on, were doing an after school program. And so I thought, I'm going to go to another private school and I'm going to tell them what we do. And I'm going to say, look, this school is doing it after school. Why don't you put it into your English department?
Mm-hmm.
And they put it into the English department. Then I went to another private school and said, these guys, they're really interested in this social emotional learning program. And maybe you could put it in your history department. And so that's the way I sort of made my way through the school system to build up a reputation. It was exciting, way more exciting than graphic design. I'll just say that.
And then the senior centers supported you too. So You use the word social emotional learning. Now, I would guess you didn't even know what that meant when you started.
You're
So
right.
there's been a huge learning curve for you. So what do the kids and the adults get out of this program?
Great question. Well, I really appreciate that you asked me, did I know what that meant? And I didn't. And that was also a wonderful piece, is that I was learning so much about the education system, and what was important and what was being left out. And there is, and especially now, that 13 years ago, the smartphone did not have the grip that it has now.
Right.
And so now empathy, Obama did a speech at Dartmouth, I think, before I started Sages and Seekers, and before he was president, and he said that he felt the empathy deficit in the United States was worse than the fiscal deficit. And I started to do some research, and I found out that since 2010, there has been a huge decline in empathy for college students. And can you imagine now with the smartphone where they can avoid emotions? And I've talked to students now, and they say, oh, well, we break up on a text message because we don't want to feel the emotions of the other person. Let me start with the value for the older adults. Enrolling and participating in 8 weeks, the way we have designed our program, allows an older adult to do 2 things that they don't have the opportunity necessarily to do. One is to have a life review, which Robert Butler, who's a psychologist who's no longer with us, he said that he felt every older adult should do a life review before they pass. And I didn't really understand it. I thought, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But when I watched what happened to some of the seniors, the sages, I totally understood. They were coming up to me afterwards and saying, I had an epiphany, I thought I used to, hate this, and I looked at high school in a negative way, and now, their perspective is different. They're not in that moment. And so when you look at something from a different time, you are able to understand the value and not just the pain of it. And my favorite was, I had a woman who stopped me. She was leaving on her walker, and she said, Elly, I had an epiphany. And I said, scoot over, Peggy. I need to hear this. And she said, all my life, I thought my father hated me, until I told my student the story of growing up in Germany during the war. And I realized that my father had to put food on the table for 5 people. And that's why he never paid any attention to me. And he was a composer. And so she understood something, and she was, I would say, mildly depressed. And she never came in and did this after that. Every week she would come in like that. But following that, she was really quite, I think, freed. And so I saw that happen for many, many sages, and also the ability to do generativity, which is to hand your hard-earned lessons to another generation, is really quite important. And so the sages are able to do that, and it gives them value and also relevance, because they're sharing information with someone who's a teenager. So they're learning and they feel more relevant. Mm-hmm. For the teens, I'll tell you, it's very different since COVID. Mm-hmm. Before COVID, it is an incredible tool for developing empathy. I don't know if you know this, but you cannot teach empathy. It's something that has to be developed or, like experienced. And so that's what happens when they sit with an older adult. And so I thought, well, that's that's great. This is social emotional learning and there's big value that they're getting. But what I learned during COVID, when the students would enroll program after program, they would finish one and then the next one that started, 2 weeks later, they enrolled again.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and I truly understood. And I think you even talked about conversation as, to quote you, conversation is a path to building empathy between individuals. And I think the conversation, the fact that they could actually, because we were on Zoom at that time, that they could look into someone's eyes and someone was listening to them, someone was hearing them, someone was agreeing with their pain and their suffering. And that was a whole new piece that I recognized. Before that, in the in-person programs, it's always evident that the kids are able to learn that you can live through failure. Mm-hmm. And, because we have sages that are, 70, 80, they may have failed into businesses and the amount of wisdom that they share is phenomenal. So it's what I like to say is Sages and Seekers is not a mentoring program. Nobody has power over the other person. They come in with equal information to share. And in sharing, they each grow and they begin to shatter the stereotypes of ageism both ways. The sages come in or say to me, why would I sign up for that when my own grandkids don't want to talk to me? It's amazing to sit with somebody from another generation. Mm-hmm. And some of the stories that, each of them tell are just wonderful, fabulous, moving, funny, everything.
Yeah, I bet. So you mentioned the life review and all. Is that part of the 8-week training that you do, or how does that work?
Well, when people enroll in Sages and Seekers, the only orientation or onboarding that we give them is just the rules, like you can talk about anything you want if both of you are in agreement. And so I think the best way to describe it is during the 8 weeks, we have a curriculum, but it's very loose. What we're doing is talking about what it is to be human. The sages share their stories. Some of them, are funny. Some of them are very moving. And so the students are learning, they're learning how to open up as well. And I think that really, we don't say, well, this week we're going to talk about social media, or this week we're going to talk about, how difficult it is to not be seen when you're older. We don't do that. And we really just allow them to come together and talk about what's on their mind. And an example is when we were in Boston and the week after the marathon bombing, that's what the kids wanted to talk about. And that's what the older adults wanted to talk about. And so they talked about, and I'm sure all sorts of issues come up. You talk about your fears, you talk about public places, you talk about the mental health, all sorts of things come up. And that, I think, is what makes Sages and Seekers so powerful, is that it's allowing people to address what is important to them or what is scaring them. A lot of kids talk about, the pressure of getting into the right college and, I don't want to disappoint my parents and all of those things. And so here you have someone who's 80 and can say to them, you need to choose to do something that you enjoy, not that you think you should do. It's just an incredible melding of resources, actually.
So, I'm a little trepidatious hearing that it seems so uncontrolled, right? It's just happens as it happens. So, like, I think as a sage, I might be nervous. Like, what if we sit there across from each other on Zoom and what do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? And you both kind of sit there. Right? How does that work? And is it a group or is it one-on-one?
Great question. So in person, we have between 8 and 15 sages and 8 and 15 seekers. And it is one-on-one, but we are together. This is, I think, the beauty of sages and seekers is that part of it at the beginning of each one is we're together as a group. And in that group, we bring up questions and topics, and they're always, like I might say, let's spend 1 minute talking to, a sage and a seeker talking about, would you support a clothing company that made their clothing in a sweatshop? And it was fascinating to me because I had a sage, a 96-year-old woman who raised her hand and she said, I stopped buying Hershey chocolate when I heard there was, some issue going on. And then, the kids were saying, well, this fast clothing stuff. And so all sorts of things come up, but the basis of it is that human connection and how we treat each other and what makes us human and what makes us tick and what makes you sad or what makes you happy. But there's guidance. There's guidance. And then after we meet together for 15 minutes, then you are broken off in pairs. And the students actually choose who they want to work with. So somebody might, if you were to enroll during the speed dating process, the second week, you would tell them what you do with Hey Boomer, and they would say, I want to do a podcast. So they might choose you because of that. They might choose you because you remind them of their favorite aunt.
So online now, because of COVID, you had to go online. So now you're international, I understand, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So online now, do you also have that group experience and the speed dating to get to know each other?
Yes. It's the same program, and that's why we keep it small. Online, it's only 8 and 8, because if the screen is filled with, all these tons of people, it's not intimate. And the point is to really get to know someone else. So we do the first helping to break down the stereotypes, and then they speed date, and then they're paired with somebody. So what we do is the first part is all in a group. You see everyone on the screen, and then they go into breakout rooms with the person that they've chosen to talk to. And we give them a topic if they are desperate. So you don't have to worry. You can do it and you'll have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I just know teenagers can be like, well, I have nothing. So, yeah. But, there you go. There's a bias of mine that I need to overcome, right?
Yes, yeah. That's so great. You could see that. Yes. Well, I do have to tell you this because I love this story. I asked my neighbors, they're a couple, to please go to the Larchmont Chartered School because it was sort of nearby and I needed 2 more sages. And so the gentleman said, well, he was in the film industry forever. And, the film industry is pretty hot right now with saying you can't say certain things, you can't do certain things. And so he didn't tell me this, but he was a little bit nervous. At the end, he said to me, I just want you to know, I was really nervous. I didn't want to get a female seeker, and I didn't want to have to talk about sex. And so apparently she came in one week and he said, how was your weekend? And she said, I had a fight with my mother. And he said, really? Well, what was that about? That was his problem. He never should have asked. But
Right.
she said, my mother says I'm not old enough to sleep with my boyfriend. And so they had a really wonderful, meaningful conversation about that.
Wow.
But Jim never told me until afterwards. He said, my 2 worst fears came true, and he lived through it. And he's actually starting this, the program at the same school on Wednesday. So it couldn't have been that bad.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, there was some research that you had conducted to see about, the pros and cons and what people are learning and getting from this. And I imagine you had to do that for some grant money. But tell us what you found out through the research.
Well, I reached out to Mary Helen Imordino Yang. So if anyone is in the education field, they will know her. She is in education, but she's also a brain scientist. And so she was fascinated by Sages and Seekers because of the storytelling aspect. And she said, I'd really like to study this to get more information. And so her premise, and of course it's true, and she's famous now, is that unless emotions are involved, you really cannot learn something. So in other words, when people are lecturing or just trying to teach something, it's very difficult for many people to learn. And she said she noticed when she taught in Dorchester, in the Boston area, that the kids would come in and they would put their heads down on their desk every day and not look up. And she said one day she came in and she started to tell them a story. And she said first the heads came up and then the hands went up. And so she went back to Harvard to study the brain. And what she found out was that when you hear a story, it lights up parts of the brain all the way into the brain stem that do not get lit up in normal learning. Yeah. So she did in fact study us. And the surprising thing for me, I anticipated empathy being the big deal. And she said the number one outcome was a greater sense of purpose for not only the students, but that's a big deal because we have so many students that are contemplating or attempting suicide and huge anxiety. But if you have a purpose, that, diminishes all the anxiety and things because you're focused. And the next piece was empathy. And the third piece, which was really interesting, is a greater interest in civic engagement. And I think that speaks a lot for older adults because we must have really great stories and be fun to be with if we're inspiring young people to go out there and be with other people. And I think, the way the smartphone is and technology is that there's a whole other movement, I want to work from home. I don't want to engage. And so this to me is huge. That we as boomers and beyond young people to want to be out there, to want to see more than they can see on TikTok and Instagram and things like that.
I think the purpose then also is a strong motivator for the sages, right? Their sense of purpose too. Yes.
Exactly. And also, this really got me. They were given a cognitive test at the start and then at the finish. And in 8 weeks, their cognitive abilities went up. Which
is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So how do you sign up?
Yes, we want everybody because we have so many students that need someone to talk with. Harvard did a study that said that 92% of students felt there was no one they could confide in their schools.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
really
so,
sad.
what I've heard is that even therapists are very hard to find right now for adults and students. I mean, we're not therapists as older adults,
Mm-hmm.
but we've seen a lot. And I think it's very grounding to hear, the stories of successes and failures and, picking yourself up. And all of these things are just so incredibly important.
So if I wanted to do this, and I do, so I would just go to your website to sign up, or how does that work? Do you do you do a background check on people, or how does this work?
Okay. So you do enroll on the website, and
which is Sages and Seekers spelled out .org.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can choose if you're interested in the in-person programs. If you live in LA, we have some. There's some in Boston. There's some all over the country, but we don't keep track of when they do the program. But we can help you out if you're in these two areas. But online, it's so easy. You don't even have to leave your home. You can enroll online. You pick which day, which time. We have 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. I think right now we even have Friday programs. And then you choose the time that you want. You enroll. We only do background checks on in-person programs, and you don't have to go get fingerprinted. It's all done. We send you what you need to fill out, and then that's done. So it's pretty effortless, except for showing up. It's very important if you enroll in a program that you attend all 8 weeks, because it's one-on-one, you're leaving someone alone. You're leaving someone without someone to speak with. So they show up, and it works both ways. Then the person who shows up and you don't show up, they're diminished.
So I guess that has happened before.
It has happened. And sometimes, it's very valid. But sometimes, I forgot. And that's, we remind though. We call, we remind. We do everything we can do to make it work.
Well, there's a couple of people listening that have participated or are participating. So I would love to hear, let's see, Deb says 8 minutes for the first chat with a new person each week and 40 minutes for the in-depth with the seeker I am matched with for 7 weeks. That's been her experience. So I guess the 8 minutes for the first chat is the online dating kind of thing.
Well, the first week, it's all the speed dating. But each week, thank you, Deb, for bringing that up, because I feel if we're really going to impact ageism, then what we've got to do is let them see not just one older person is interesting, but all of them are interesting. So that's the 8 minute. Every week, you get to sit with someone in the group for 8 minutes so that you can get to know other people. And it's really, we added that because we could see there were so many people who were not paired that were fascinated by each other.
And do you ever come back together as a group, like at the end, and debrief or anything?
We do. The last week is a debriefing, but the 7th week, the week before the final one, is tribute week. And the students are asked to write a tribute to their sage. And we ask them, please don't write their history. They know when their husband went to war. They know how many kids they had. They know where they went to school and what they do all day long. What we want to hear is, how were you impacted? How did they change how you are going to move forward in the world? And that, if this is Deb's first time, just wait for that, Deb. You're going to love that. It's really, many times there's tears. And,
tears.
it's great. It's great to be acknowledged for who you are and what you bring to the table. And so that's what we're asking students to do. And it's a great lesson for them. I mean, we've had kids use their tribute as their college essay, even.
Oh,
Yeah.
What a great idea. Yeah. Oh, we have another Deb who's signed up and she goes, I can't wait to get started. And Martha says, she thinks it, and I agree. This is probably true that it's easier to talk to someone other than your own grandparent.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, we feel the judgment or we feel the concern, or maybe it's going to get back to mom or dad or whatever. And so to have a non-relative who is older and also a sage to speak with, I think is probably very valuable.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. And I think the other thing, Wendy, that I usually tell people when they say, well, why would I sign up when my own grandkids won't talk to me, is when you talk to your own grandkids, you are invested in their future. You're coming at them with questions like, are you studying? Did you apply for college? Where are you going to go? What are you thinking about? Who are you hanging out with? Are you doing drugs? How many hours are you on your phone? I've read about that. And so the fascinating thing to me is a lot of sages who have done the program have told me that it has improved their relationship with their grandkids because they ask deeper questions. They want to know more about them. And same with the kids. Like at the very beginning, I had a student during the debriefing, and he stood up and he said, I wish I could talk like this to my own family.
Yeah.
And now, I don't know why we don't think we can talk about, really important things and things that are on our mind. And
I think, like you said, we're so invested that it makes it less safe sometimes to talk to your parents or your grandparents. So let me ask you about a takeaway, Elly, because unfortunately we're getting close to the end here.
Okay.
So what advice would you give to someone who might be inspired like you were, but who is like, I'm just a graphic designer. How can I do something like this?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked that. I really think the idea of an encore career, like stepping up again and feeling the power that you have as an older adult with your years of experience and wisdom and finding something that you're passionate about. I think that's the key, is if you're passionate about it, you're not going to have the fear and the defeat and all those things. You really feel like you're on a mission. And if it doesn't go anywhere, you've grown. So I say, it doesn't matter what your background is, step up, find something that is exciting to you. You can always call me. They can call me. I have a million ideas of what I want to do that, when I hand over Sages and Seekers to somebody else.
So here you go. She just invited you to call her. I'm going to give you her email address. You can reach her at ekatz, Katz, at sagesandseekers.org. And you spell it out, sagesandseekers.org. So you can reach Elly that way. You can check out her website at sagesandseekers.org. And I love some of the pictures on there. Oh my gosh. It makes me wish that there was some in person, but I imagine as I'm looking at what Deb says, the bonding happens in person or not in person. It just happens. Fabulous. Thank you, Elly.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about something you love. So
I know, right? And to find that passion, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, this has been my passion, this, Hey Boomer, sharing stories like yours, coaching people who are looking for how to, live into their passion. Great. I want to give a quick shout out to the Greenville Podcast Company for their expert editing and production of the Hey Boomer podcast, which is available on all of the podcast apps, Also, I wanted to invite you to download the vitality assessment from heyboomer.biz. And then if you find that you are a little diminished in your vitality and you want to get excited and pumped up and move forward, then let's talk. On the heyboomer.biz/coaching website, you can schedule a complimentary 20-minute session, which generally goes about 30 minutes. And it's a lot of fun. You'll get some insights from that as well. And who is coming up next week? Next week, it's another Wendy. I know, we're going to have trouble figuring out who's talking. Her name is Wendy Battles, and she is the host of a podcast called Reinvention Rebels, but that's her part-time job. She also works at Yale University as their cybersecurity awareness expert. Can you imagine? I know. But the Reinvention Rebels is all about women over 55 who have, like you, Elly, and like I, found their next passion, found their next thing that they are just so excited about doing. So she has so much energy. I just can't even compete. But I always like to leave you with the belief that you can live with passion, you can live with relevance, and you can live with courage. And remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.